Hi, my name is Amanda Panacea, and you're listening to the Healer Revolution podcast. This is a community for self-healers, biohackers, practitioners, and any other helping professionals. You're in the right place if you're seeking conversations about how pain becomes passion, the connection between physical, energetic, mental, and our spiritual self, finding your body's ancient wisdom, the latest biohacking technologies, clinical research, and if you just want to nerd out about complex biochemistry and quantum physics. But this is also for entrepreneurs who seek infinite abundance and a supportive community. So pour a cup of King coffee or Sisters tea and let's join the revolution. Welcome to the Healer Revolution podcast. I am Amanda Panacea, and today I am thrilled to welcome Lewis Moon. He is a pioneer in the world of mineral balancing and hair tissue mineral analysis, and is the creator of the hair analysis app, as well as the co-founder of Valence Nutraceuticals. Lewis brings a wealth of knowledge and personal experience to the mineral balancing program. In this episode, we dive deep into the fascinating world of copper imbalances, which you guys know is like one of my favorite topics. And we explore how it can manifest in physical and emotional health, and why understanding copper detox is vital for holistic healing. Lewis shares his profound journey from battling chronic symptoms and burnout to discovering the power of HTMA, and then also becoming a software developer and building tools to guide others on their healing paths. We also discuss the intricate connections between copper, trauma, immune system health, detox, and Lewis highlights his expertise in navigating the often challenging healing reactions that come with removing toxins like copper, mercury, and aluminum. Lewis also introduces us to his groundbreaking app and the personalized support it offers practitioners and individuals seeking out optimal health through the HTMA. So if you're curious about the hidden role minerals play in mental and physical health, or you want to understand how to tackle complex healing journeys, this episode is really packed with actionable insights and inspiration. So I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Thanks for listening. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Healer Revolution podcast. I am your host, Amanda Panacea, and today I'm really excited to get to sit down and have a conversation with Lewis Moon. He is a hair tissue mineral analysis practitioner and a software developer. Hi, Lewis. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm pretty good, thank you. Not too bad. Slightly tired today because I was up last night watching
Yeah.
your election, so that was an interesting night.
It was, yeah. And my boyfriend trades Dogecoin, and it was going crazy last night. So he was up
Oh,
all
right,
night
yeah.
too.
Yeah, that's understandable. I was getting a lot of messages this morning from people that are into crypto, just like screenshotting
Yeah.
showing them to me, and I'm like, man, yes, what happens when Trump promotes crypto, I guess.
Yeah. So we're not going to talk about crypto, but since you're a software developer, I thought you you would be interested in that. Today we're going to talk more about the HTMA, the hair tissue mineral analysis. And I really would love to go deep into the topic of copper and copper toxicity. It's one of my favorite things to talk about. I see it in almost every single person that I work with. And I predominantly work with people who have had like mast cell activation and histamine intolerance, and many women. And so it's just really, really prevalent in this population, but I think also in men too, for a variety of reasons. So tell us a little bit about your history. How did you get into the HTMA? What drew you to doing this type of work?
Yeah, so I'm 34 now. Starting to feel a bit older with the number rather than how I feel. But I started feeling sort of unwell, I'd say around 14, 15. And I sort of got brought up like every Western kid does, eating pretty bad food. I had chronic ear infection, so I was always on a lot of antibiotics and steroids and that sort of stuff. I was kind of a high achiever, so I sort of had this mentality, mainly from the people around me, my family, I suppose, from always wanting to strive and achieve and be the best at sports or whatever subject I was studying in. So I sort of got this mentality of really working hard for stuff. But I think that actually, was one of the reasons why I ended up becoming ill, when I was around 14, 15. Just because I'd kind of like burned out my body, But back then at 15, I totally was unaware of it. The first symptoms was brain fog, and then that sort of like went into complete 24/7 derealization and detachment from reality, which was very obviously very, very unpleasant. But it becomes so chronic that I ended up just thinking that's who I was. That's what I was all about, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I just carried on, as any sort of normal teenager does. Went out drunk, got into recreational drugs, a bit of smoking here and there. And, one of the things that society sort of tells you is, if you're not feeling good, exercise. So I thought, well, I'm an athlete. I'll just run my way out of my problems. And I'd go on long runs, and when I got home, I would get like clarity for maybe 10 minutes or 15 minutes. I used to think to myself, well, surely the more I run, the more clarity I'm going to end up getting. But it turns out that didn't work. It just made me worse, more fatigued. Not fatigued because I was actually in a state of fight or flight. I wasn't aware of that. I was in a chronic state of fight or flight, so I did sort of have energy. But my derealization got worse. I had skin conditions, extreme social anxiety as a result. Completely lost connection with my personality. I had this new personality that I thought was just me. Um, and heart palpitations, negative thoughts all the time. So I knew that I was in a serious situation. I knew that there was something wrong, and I was constantly looking for answers. Going to the doctors and getting blood tests, everything came back normal. I'm sure you've heard that before.
Mm.
And then, like, all of a sudden, I think it was like 2010, I started sort of hearing the word brain fog online. I'm like, that's me. I mean, if I've got anything, my brain's foggy. So I was looking at brain fog and researching into it, and then I've come across Dr. Lawrence Wilson, his article on brain fog. And it was like a light bulb moment had switched on, because all of the things that he was listing in this long article on brain fog was actually related to physical things rather than mental. So he's talking about things like candida, heavy metal toxicity, parasites, low zinc, copper toxicity, this big array of things. And I was like, finally, this actually sounds rational. Let's try and start the program. So literally for me, I actually had instant results just from lowering my sugar and carbohydrate intake. I started getting reduced brain fog, which was obviously amazing. So I knew I was onto something, straight away, which was like uh, the best feeling ever because I'd literally had chronic derealization for 6 years. So it was pretty, I was in a pretty sorry state. So, I just carried on doing the program. And it wasn't too long into the program where I sort of realized my health was actually way worse than I thought. I thought I'd found this magic formula, and within 2 or 3 months, I would get back to normal. That ended up taking
That's
me
what
on.
we all think.
That's it. Yeah, that ended up taking me on a 5-year journey. I ended up going to Thailand, just to get away from my family and friends because I was in such a mess, and kind of found myself in the mountains in Thailand with a nutritional balancing practitioner, just doing coffee enemas all day and sauna therapy. And he sort of looked after me, took me under his wing. And it was that year really that was a massive turning point where I just was removing tons and tons of heavy metals. And, one of the things I ended up removing quite dramatically was copper. I had a major copper dump, and I was totally unprepared for the copper dump because I heard about it, I'd read about it. I was kind of skeptical about it. I was thinking, you know, doesn't quite make sense, but all of the symptoms sort of matched up with me. So the further I did the program, the more I sort of got on board with the fact that I had copper toxicity. And then all of a sudden, this copper started coming out my system. And, I'll be completely honest with you, it was a horrendous experience.
Yeah.
One of the reasons being is that I was one, unprepared. Two, my practitioner had never actually gone through a copper dump, so he didn't like give me the advice that I would personally give to clients now. So it was, yeah, I had like 3 months of removing all this copper.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, at the end of it, I just kind of wanted to go home to my mom. It was that bad. I was like, Mom, I need to come home. Like,
Yeah.
I'm in a state. But for whatever reason, when I got back to England, well, I know what the reason is. I got a lot of copper out my system, but that's when the healing process started speeding up much quicker. Um, it was like a wrench had been removed from an engine. Is probably the best way to describe it. Something had just released itself, and
Mm.
I ended up having healing reactions essentially every weekend because I'd found a job. I needed to earn some money. So my body knew that it was with the weekend, and I started going through these weekly, healing reactions every weekend, and they kind of stop on a Monday and I go back to work. It was really weird, and I went through that cycle for a couple of years, and sort of finally you start forgetting the past. I started forgetting how ill I was, how fatigued I was. I finally had energy throughout the day until finally it got to a point where I was kind of all right, but traumatized essentially from the past, and that's when there's a bit of a reintegration process of, finding your tribe and, becoming of service to the world. So for me, I always talk about the program now as like a two-step process. There's one process of just healing yourself, and then there's another process of like reintegration with society as a healthy, grounded human being. So
Yeah.
that's it in a nutshell. I'm really shortening it down there, but
Yeah.
pretty wild story.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really the goal with this podcast for me is to have these conversations, the cycle of heal people, and passing on the information that I thought or other people think is the most helpful. So thank you.
You're
Um, a,
welcome.
f- a few things. Can you explain what derealization and depersonalization feels like?
Yeah, so probably the best way to describe it is a little bit like wearing a motorcycle helmet all day. You're just not connected with the world. And there's severities, I suppose, of wearing that motorcycle helmet. Some people are so severe, it's like a motorcycle helmet that's clouded. You know,
Mm-hmm.
as you do the program, that cloudiness begins to reduce, and after a while, it feels as if the helmet's sort of shrinking. So you're starting to feel that connection again.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the visor will come up for a few hours. Oh wow, this is the world. And then eventually, it's like removing the motorcycle helmet, which is a bit of a shock to the system because a lot of people, I know you talk about calcium shells a lot. I was on a calcium shell, and a lot of people, when they're in this shell, suppose that's what the shell is. I wouldn't say everyone who's got a calcium shell has derealization necessarily, but they do have this shell around them, um, which in a way removes them from everyday society, the world around them. And it's interesting how it's integrated itself into our language. Oh, that person's coming out of their shell.
Yeah.
The shell's reducing, and when the shell starts to crack, bearing in mind some people, me for example, have been inside this thick shell for like 6 years. You essentially forget who you are as an individual. So when the shell started coming down, I was saying stuff and people were started laughing. I was like, I used to be funny when I was a kid,
Yeah.
you know, and I sort of lost that character I had, that personality, and a sense of humor, and people just started like laughing at me again. So I'm sort of like reintegrating this personality that I kind of forgot, and but it's new because I'm like 7 years, 8 years down the line, and then you know just come further and further out, and it's interesting to see how your family reacts to that because I remember back in the day, I think my family felt awkward around me, and I felt awkward around them, and I wasn't particularly funny because I couldn't pick up on social cues very good because I was so derealized. Um, I couldn't because you need energy for laughter and you need energy to be happy. So I didn't have any energy for that. So I was really kind of awkward and, but now my family's like constantly having banter with me and I give it back like really strong. Yeah, it's really nice for them to sort of see me in a different light now, whereby they can confide in me and I'm sort of like someone that they feel like they can open up to. And
Yeah,
I think you can only really get that if you're healthy. You need a level of health to feel emotions. What's one of the things with being ill is that our body essentially goes into survival mode. So things like picking up on social cues, laughter, libido, you know, happy emotions become diminished.
right.
So you can't, it's very difficult for you to just have normal interactions with people. And it's even more difficult to be that individual that people feel safe around, they can relax around, they can enjoy themselves around. So I think really that's the true beauty, in my opinion, of becoming healthy again, because I think the core foundation of the core foundation of the universe is relationships, you know, and
Yeah,
I think when you can have real strong relationships and happy relationships with your spouse, your friends, your family, your children, that's when life becomes really fulfilling and rich, if that makes
yeah.
sense.
Oh,
So,
yeah, absolutely. When I was really in the calcium shells severe with the copper toxicity, it just felt like I didn't really like anything. Like I didn't have any passion and I was just kind of going through the motions. And then I would abuse drugs and alcohol to feel that, to be connected to people, to be able to have conversations. Because otherwise it was like this almost like you're in a dream. Like this, is
yeah.
this really my life? And it's like this passive suicidality sometimes, like, well, it doesn't matter what happens to me. Those kind of thoughts can get kind of dark. And then of course you're like, am I depressed? Like, why am I depressed?
It's difficult because you don't actually know what's up.
Yeah.
So you're sort of assuming that this is who you are. Do you know what I mean? Like, oh, I'm Lewis. I'm just this kind of apathetic
Yeah.
person that people don't really want to be around. But it's interesting when you do take recreational drugs. I mean, what do they do? Well, one of the things they do is they literally force the adrenal glands to release hormones that energize you, that temporarily remove that filter. A lot of people use alcohol for the same effect, essentially. I mean, I know loads of people who literally come out of the shell when they're on alcohol.
Yeah,
They're a
exactly.
completely different person. And I think that's probably the true individual if they was just healthy. Do you know what I mean? So I think that's what a lot of people do. It becomes a subconscious addiction to do things and find things that literally stimulate the adrenal glands, whether it be alcohol, recreational drugs, smoking. Some people use anger. Some people use resentment and negative things to get. Some people use the news. This will be a great,
Yeah.
great one for a lot of people this morning. They'll be really getting a lot of energy from the news this morning.
Yeah.
And vice versa. Both
Sports. my
sport.
dad my dad and this is a big one for having his emotional roller coaster about sports every day.
It's all related really to adrenal output if you want to really simplify it. And whole
Hmm.
countries can have this adrenal apathy. When they're going through wars and stuff, the whole country's adrenal glands will be, I suppose they are stimulated in them environments but the whole mood of the country can be sort of reduced, and I think a lot of it is um, how healthy your body's functioning. And it's not
Hmm.
just adrenal glands, obviously. I mean, when the adrenal glands
Yeah.
are burnt out, it becomes like a web of loads of different things that's going off. But I think the adrenal glands are sort of key, and the thyroid that give you that spark, that energy, that vitality for life.
Oh
So
yeah, absolutely. So
sure.
let's talk about how the adrenals are related to the copper toxicity and maybe some of the other mineral patterns, because it definitely is like the a big key factor that looking at that hair tissue mineral analysis can give you a lot of insight to your stress patterns, stages of stress, adrenal, thyroid hormones, and why does that lead to toxicity of copper per se?
Yeah. So I think it all started back really with I spoke about this recently actually on Instagram a fair bit. It sort of all started back with George Watson. So George Watson was really the pioneer in with oxidation rates. And he basically found two oxidation rates, slow oxidation and fast oxidation. He used different methods than what we do. They mainly use things like carbon dioxide and, and odor and all sorts of different things. And he sort of realized that slow oxidizers tend to be more depressed and fatigued and apathetic, and fast oxidizers tend to be more anxious, on the go, panicky. And obviously, there's a middle ground in between where people have a sort of a healthy balance. Um, so so you got George Watson, and then you got Hans Selye, which came up with the stages of stress. So he sort of realized that people have this balance, and then they'll move into an alarm stage of stress. So this is when the adrenal glands start firing up. This is when people are sort of generally healthy. The adrenal glands will fire up. They'll go into an alarm state. If that alarm state is not dealt with and the adrenal glands keep on producing, various adrenal hormones, um, the adrenals will essentially start to burn out and collapse. And this is when an individual goes into more of an exhaustion stage of stress. Well, a resistant stage of stress, and then if that keeps on going, it goes into more of an exhaustion stage of stress. So one of the amazing things that Dr. Eck did, who was the pioneer in hair analysis, essentially sort of merged the two and figured out that using a hair mineral analysis test, you can understand the oxidation rate from Watson, and you can correlate that to the stages of stress. So it's quite scientific, but essentially he figured out that if you have a sodium and potassium levels that are more elevated on a hair test than calcium and magnesium, the individual's a fast oxidizer, and vice versa, the individual's a slow oxidizer. So, if you match that up with the stages of stress, a balanced oxidation rate would be sort of like a mild slow or a mild fast. And then you would get an alarm stage where the body goes into an alarm reaction. This is when the adrenals start to release aldosterone, especially. The kidneys end up retaining sodium when aldosterone is released. So this is the reason why sodium increases on a hair test. It actually, counterintuitively, the kidneys will actually tell the body to excrete potassium, when you've got an increased aldosterone. However, because the body is in a fast oxidative stage of stress, it's running quickly, the engine's running fast. Potassium's needed quite a lot within the cells to maintain that energy, essentially. So this is one of the reasons why you also see elevated potassium on hair tests. Um, and then what happens is a person basically burns out of those nutrients, burns out of nutrients across the board, and they'll move into slow oxidation, which is a resistant stage of stress. So the reason why calcium and magnesium are actually low on hair tests when the sodium and potassium are high, when aldosterone's elevated, is sodium and potassium essentially dissolve calcium magnesium. They're solvents in the body. So this is the reason why you see a low calcium magnesium. So if the adrenal glands are exhausted, tired, the aldosterone's not running around the body, very elevated. The kidneys are not telling is not telling the cells to retain sodium. It's telling the body the potassium's coming out of the cells, and then they essentially are not dissolving calcium magnesium. So the calcium magnesium rises. All right. So this is how we figured out the resistance stage. And then there's an exhaustion stage that these two early pioneers discovered, and they couldn't really figure out what was going off. Some, that people was in slow oxidation or fast oxidation. And Dr. Watts, Dr. Eck and Dr. Wilson come to the conclusion that that's probably a 4-low pattern, where all of the first 4 minerals are basically below ideal. So that's when the body is exhausted, and we would call that essentially like a sub-oxidation pattern. So how does copper come into this situation? Obviously, when I'm talking about this, you kind of just honing in on specific things, but it's like a full body, a full system issue. So I think one of the biggest reasons why copper ends up becoming elevated is probably zinc deficiency. Zinc and copper are sort of a bit like yin and yang. They sort of work together. So if you have low zinc, generally the body will have elevated copper. However, one of the things that happens when the adrenal glands are weakened, so when we're talking about copper toxicity, you usually see copper toxicity in slow oxidizers. So slow oxidizers are the ones who have a low sodium and potassium and an elevated calcium magnesium. So this essentially means that the adrenal glands are underproducing. So it turns out that the adrenal glands need to be in a healthy state to essentially work with the liver or send signals to the liver to create copper binding proteins. So the key one is obviously ceruloplasmin. Ceruloplasmin's made inside of the liver. So if you've not got this key copper binding protein running around the body in a healthy state, what happens? Copper's not bound properly, it's not moved around the body efficiently, therefore it tends to build up, and it builds up in the liver, usually, the kidneys, the brain, and this is where the term, copper toxicity comes from. I think it's a terminology that we sort of need to move away from, in my
Yeah.
opinion, because, it makes people think that, one, they're ingesting too much copper, which is not necessarily the case. It's just that copper's not being made available. And it also gives people the impression that they need to stay away from copper, which is also not the case. So trying to explain to people that although you've got copper that's built up in various organs, um, it's better to call it biounavailable copper. You've got copper that's not bioavailable to the body, because when copper is available, it does miraculous things. I mean, one of the key things, it's an antioxidant. It's used in the production of ATP, energy production. So this is one of the reasons why people feel fatigued when they've not got bioavailable copper. It is part of it helps iron become metabolized. So anyone that's got anemia usually have low bioavailable copper, because you need copper to absorb iron in mobilization, essentially. It's involved in immune function. It's involved in skin conditions and collagen. So it's really not a good idea to sort of vilify copper,
Right.
because actually copper is obviously essential. And I think this is where HTMA comes into its own, because you got to appreciate what Dr. Eck did. He's taking these pioneers in stress theory and oxidation theory and merging them into hair analysis. So he's created this system essentially where we can very, very accurately understand oxidation rates, but he also added copper metabolism into that, understanding the role of copper. So he sort of found, just by doing literally thousands and thousands of hair tests, that a lot of people do have bioavailable copper, even though their copper level on a hair test appears to be low, you know. So he actually found that, well, if someone's adrenal glands are weak, that's actually an indicator that the individual has probably stored copper, biounavailable copper. He realized that if copper is extremely low on a hair test, that's also an indicator of biounavailable copper. And there's literally, I think there's like 23, it's 27, I think, altogether, but some cancel each other out. Um, So, for example, a low zinc is an indicator, but a very high zinc is an indicator as well. So he sort of understood how to figure out whether someone's got biounavailable copper on a hair test, but he also understood that that doesn't necessarily mean people don't need copper. You
Right.
know, so he also figured out that when people, for example, are in fast oxidation, um, their adrenal glands are working, overtime essentially, or healthier, I suppose, than obviously burnout. That means that ceruloplasmin is being generated more, but because they're overproducing, ceruloplasmin's kind of overproducing as well. So it's constantly binding onto copper and sort of sucking it out of the tissues. So, fast oxidizers need more copper. But he also found out in slow oxidizers, who generally have biounavailable copper because their adrenal glands are weakened, if they've actually got a low sodium to potassium ratio, they actually discovered that in order to increase that critical ratio, some bioavailable copper is needed in a supplement form. And I think that's key to appreciating the dynamic effects of copper. Excuse me, especially when it comes to hair analysis, because you have a lot of people in the health world, and some of them will be anti-copper, and some of them will be pro-copper. You
Right.
know, yeah. What we're trying to say in hair analysis is that you're kind of both right. Copper is bad when it's toxic, and copper is really good when it's available. But you can't just give people copper if they're toxic. You know, and you can't just not give people copper if they're toxic, if that makes sense. So having this hair analysis test where we can see, right, this individual is showing signs of biounavailable copper because of all the hidden indicators. However, they've got a low NAK ratio, so they actually need some bioavailable copper in the moment. I think is key to sort of bring these two contrasts into a rational balance, you know.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
um,
absolutely. Like
trying
with
to tell, educating people on all of this is really important, because if you was to just read a hair analysis as is, you would think I'm talking bonkers, because most people's copper is actually low. So if you're saying to someone you've probably got copper toxicity and they read a hair test without any instruction manual, they're just going to assume that they've not got copper toxicity. So this is where we really, need to appreciate all of the research that's been done in the past with, all of the different pioneers in the hair analysis space, for us to be able to read hair analysis as a storybook, as this interconnecting weave of, many different minerals and interactions.
Yeah, exactly. It's not high doesn't mean high, low doesn't mean low. Sometimes it changes. Sometimes it changes depending on a different mineral. So it can be really confusing to look at, even as a practitioner when you first see it, to figure out what's going on. So
Mm.
that's where like Dr. Wilson's websites can be really helpful. I was using those for like the last 10 years, even before I found HTMA, because I felt like they explained things so well about the mineral interactions and all that.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, becoming a bit of an expert in hair analysis, I mean, you know, is quite challenging. I mean, you think you know in the beginning, and
Yeah.
then you realize you don't actually know that much. So you go on this bell curve of like learning.
Yes.
Reading Dr. Wilson's website was fantastic. A little bit more challenging these days.
Yeah.
But his books are obviously amazing, and there's a lot of people out there doing podcasts and videos and a lot of information on hair analysis. But this is basically the key reason why I built the software that I built. Hair analysis app. Hair analysis dot report. Because the way that I look at it is, hair analysis is complex. There's hundreds of patterns. You know what I mean? and you have symptoms related to those patterns. So as a practitioner who we don't really earn that much for the amount of work that we need to do to analyze these tests. I went to work 4 years ago. Interestingly enough, I was working for Dr. Wilson, Dr. Lawrence Wilson, and he wanted practitioners to send him a sort of a list of all of the patterns. And I was thinking, man, I'm kind of wasting my time here because I already knew them. I'm just wasting my time writing them all out. So I thought I'll try and build an algorithm. So I started building this algorithm, put all the numbers in, prints off the patterns, copy, paste. I've saved myself about half an hour there that it just added onto our workload all of a sudden. It's understandable for new practitioners because it gets them understanding the hair tests and reading them, etc. But after a while, I thought, you know what, this could be really helpful actually for hair analysis practitioners, and that's where the real passion started to come in, and where I wanted to create a full system essentially to analyze hair tests. So yeah, I mean, it's been running now for 4 years. There's kind of hundreds of practitioners use it. I do get a lot of positive feedback from it, and I just think it acts as like a bit of a sidekick essentially for a practitioner. Because when it comes to hair analysis, there is an element of intuition when you're reading them. There's a human element of getting to know your client and just tuning in and figuring, say, just so, what I'm doing is sort of like, sort of right brain, left brain. The app is like a right brain calculated system, which essentially just helps practitioners um, get an overview of all the patterns, where what the ratios are doing. It'll help a little bit with symptom analysis and what symptoms match with what patterns, etc. And I personally think it's been a real great addition to the hair analysis space because of how complex the hair analysis tests are. And I think any new practitioners that are coming onto the scene, it's kind of a bit of a nightmare to learn hair analysis. You got to read the thick books, you got to read Dr. Wilson's tests, articles over and over again. I'm not saying don't do that, but because it's such a complex subject, I do think having a piece of software that allows practitioners to sort of learn on the go. I mean, even me, I'll run tests now and be like, oh, I didn't even see that pattern. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Popped up. Do you know what I mean? So I just think running tests, you can essentially learn on the go. It's kind of how we learned actually with Dr. Wilson. We had to read the textbooks and all that sort of stuff, but just running tests and him, well, the sort of the practitioner that was helping us would send back the patterns, and just by doing that over and over and over and over again, it sort of seeps into your brain a little bit. Um, so yeah, I think the other reason why I built it is kind of because there's a lot of people who will think that their copper's low, or they'll just read it as replacement theory.
Yeah.
So I did want to give people the opportunity who've just bought a test and got no, analysis, just to give them, actually, it's not just black and white. It's actually really complex.
Yeah.
I've got hundreds of people who have, used the system after getting not great advice, maybe, or they've just got a hair test. And there's hundreds of people who've run a hair test and then gone and found a practitioner, um, you know, who specializes in that sort of way of looking at things.
Yeah.
So, so yeah, it's a labor of love.
Yeah, because there is a lot of calculations to even just recommending like what to take. And if you don't know what you're doing, potentially that person could feel way worse if they're not given the right supplements. And even if they are sometimes, they can still feel a little bit worse temporarily, or like you mentioned, when you went through a copper elimination, you really had no idea what to expect. You had no guidance. You absolutely need somebody that's going to be there for you if that and when that happens, if you stay on that program long enough.
Mm,
So the
mm,
the app is amazing. I use it for every single test that I run. But like you said, you do still need the knowledge because sometimes people are like, well, why is it like this? Why is this like this? And you can't just be reading verbatim what's on the website. You have to have some level
Yeah.
of understanding of what's going to happen with this person and how things are going to shift maybe and what the goals are, that sort of stuff.
It's just a tool. It's a tool to help. And, I have added other tools to help practitioners, for example, healing reactions. So, you know, every metal tends to have its own symptoms related to it. So copper, the obvious one's going to be headaches, skin rashes, racing mind, you know, pretty severe sleep disturbances, anxiety. For aluminum or aluminium if you're in England. I speak to so many Americans, I just say aluminum now. But aluminum, you've got like forgetfulness. A sort of like a dementia feeling sometimes. You can't remember, you can't pick up on things. Mercury, you feel just disinterested in relationships and home life and apathetic. Nickel is very much related to dark thoughts all of a sudden, even suicidal thoughts that just come out of nowhere. So, I have built little systems inside of there that can help with that. You know what I mean? It's like, well, let's figure out how well a person, and this is what a practitioner would do, but again, it's using tools to help. Let's figure out how well a person's doing a program, because generally, if they're doing the program well, it's more likely that they're going to go through a healing reaction, just because the program is pretty savage when it comes to a complete detox program. So they're doing the program pretty well. All right, so let's have a look at some of the symptoms, and then they'll end up choosing like 7 symptoms from the copper list, and it's like it sounds to me like you're dumping copper, you know.
Yeah.
But when you get experience as a practitioner, you can get people on the phone and they'll tell you stuff, and you're like, you're definitely dumping mercury, you know.
Mm.
But that's another amazing thing, really, about just healing in general is how all of these metals essentially have their own personalities. You know,
Right.
mangan manganese has its own sort of personality. Zinc does, cadmium does. You can essentially, once you get to know all of these personalities, you can essentially talk to someone over the phone and figure out what they're probably high in, whether it be calcium, cadmium, manganese. So I thought that's one thing that fascinated me on the program was this sort of esoteric, spiritual, sort of deep aspect of it. When I started learning that every mineral kind of has its own personality, you start seeing things. You start understanding things from like a vector perspective more. Where everything's sort of vectorized, and I just find that whole process just quite fascinating because you wouldn't expect that. You just think if you're suffering from a toxin and you release it, you're just going to feel like crap. That would be the logical reasoning behind it. But it turns out that each one has its own sort of vibe, and that's and literally the whole mineral system, including metals, conglomerate together to create people's personality, and
Oh yeah.
they give off a vibration, a vibe. Join if someone comes into a room and you think, oh, they've got a bit of an off vibe. It's usually because they're probably high in cadmium or arsenic or something like that, which just gives a bit of a an off sort of vibe, if that makes sense. So it's cool, man. Love it.
Yeah. Well, I do bioenergetic testing, so my listeners are really familiar with like how everything is a vibration, everything has a specific frequency, and absolutely makes sense that if you're really high in a specific metal, especially something that maybe is like electromagnetic or even some of the like nuclear metals, that's really going to change the vibration of your tissues, your organs, your entire personality eventually.
Mm. And yeah, I mean, we talk a lot about copper and zinc is probably the key ones. Copper tends to be more feminine in its nature. Zinc tends to be more masculine. When I was copper toxic, when I was 18, 19, I was quite flamboyant. I would dance. If a if a it sounds a bit weird talking about it now, but if a guy would sort of come up and dance with me in the club, I would sort of like play along with it and stuff, and I had this sort of feminine energy about me. Do you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Uh, um, and very, you know, I had very left wing ideology thoughts. I was very sort of left wing. And then as I started doing the program, and I started getting more zinc into my body, which is more masculine. My my fashion changed. So I sort of went from, I'm not saying I'm not colourful now, but I was super colourful back then. Very, 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 very tie dye. I would wear pretty flamboyant stuff, and my sort of fashion started changing. Just didn't feel quite comfortable. I become much more grounded. So instead of the fluid sort of energy, I'm not saying there's no right or wrong. You know,
Right.
that feminine's a fantastic, masculine's fantastic. At the end of the day, I'm a male. So I went from this sort of feminine, fluid kind of vibe to a much more grounded. Um, my political ideologies become much more centric. Um, because it's not about going right. You want to go in the middle. Do you know what I mean? Like it's not about going, you know, from left to right. You want to be down the center. That's the balance. That's the oxidation rate. But I
Yeah.
did become more quote unquote masculine, more grounded, more focused. Um, and I think we're very obviously simplifying it with the copper and the zinc, but you do find that happen all of the time with,
Yeah.
and especially you can see it in the males how their personality changes over time just by increasing the zinc levels.
Right. Yeah. So zinc, explain why most of us are probably dealing with a zinc deficiency, at least even subclinical.
I think one of the biggest reasons is that zinc is one of the buffering minerals. So what I mean by that is it's one of the minerals that get burnt up fairly rapidly under stress. And the problem is that most people these days are under some form of stress, sorry, whether it be stress from diet, stress from exercise, stress from pharmaceutical drugs, stress from pollution, stress from work. So whenever you're stressing your body out, whenever you're in an alarm stage reaction or an exhaustion stage reaction, who won't relax, you're burning up nutrients. And one of the key things that gets burnt up is zinc. So I think that's probably the main reason. And then a secondary reason is just the lack of animal proteins in our foods, the lack of meat. If you look at children's diets now, they're not really getting, I've got a child now, and all my friends have got kids. And you see what they eat. You go to people's houses, and you don't. I'm not seeing organic organic burgers. I'm not seeing much chicken, really. On a consistent basis. Eggs. Um, you know, uh, fish. You know, you see it obviously now and again, but it's when you couple in this stress, and kids do have a lot of stress. A lot of it comes from cognitional stress. So a lot of females, unfortunately, these days, as well as males, are toxic. So they unfortunately pass that toxicity down to their children. So a lot of children are actually born copper toxic and zinc deficient already. Um,
I'm sure I was.
travesty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My mom says I was allergic to my stuffed animals, like right when I was born, and blankets.
And then you get all of the vaccines, which is a big stress to a very young child. And then, it makes me laugh because, a lot of women um and parents have their kids' best interests at heart. And they'll like try and breastfeed, which we all know is the best way of, you know, feeding a kid. And they'll do everything by the book and everything's super clean, but they'll go and get the vaccines because they just not don't know about it. And as soon as the child starts being able to eat, it's all gets thrown out the window. They're on Happy Meals from McDonald's, biscuits, chocolates, ice creams. And you're thinking to yourself, you just put all this effort in for the past 6 months, not sleeping because you're breastfeeding all night, making sure everything's super clean. I'm not saying they're not clean afterwards, but why stop that at 6 months? Why are you then? Why if get them on vegetables, get them on meat, get them on good quality fats and oils? Why do they end up going into this junk food? Because I personally think, I mean, you just look at your maybe your parents or your grandparents or just people older than us. They just seem more resilient, way more resilient.
Oh yeah, I have
And
a 95-year-old grandfather.
I'm the same. I mean, he's got. Sometimes I feel like he's got more energy than me. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And I think the real key to that is not the 6 months breastfeeding, it's the 10 years of decent food. I'm
Right.
not saying they had perfect food, but they didn't have the e-colorings, they didn't have all of the processed food, what we had. They were brought up on, you know, good quality, meat and two veg, sort of thing. So I think the foundation is key, when you're building bones, building muscles, building structure. And I think the foundation is at least from 0 to 15. As long as you're basically putting food on the table for your children, you're essentially in control of what they eat. When
Hmm.
they get to 18, they don't let them do what they want, but at least try and provide them with that foundation. And you hear it everywhere in books. I mean, in the Bible, you sort of, you build your house on the rocks. Don't build your house on the sand. It's all this. There's a real permeation of how important foundation is in everything. Think about a
Right.
building. The structure of a building. Usually, the first thing that's built in a building is the foundation and the elevator shaft. They sort of hold this building together. It's a bit yin and yang again, male and female energy. You got the foundation, you got the elevator shaft. It's very solid. It's very straight, and then you've got this energy that flows off it. If you've got a crumbling foundation, you're in a mess. So when you get like 15, 16, 20, 25, and you come across the program, three months ain't going to fix the problem. 6 months ain't going to fix the problem because it's a deep-seated core foundational issue. And the problem is that we're trying to fix the foundation while living in the building. You know, it's just a pain in the ass. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah,
So
absolutely. So
foundation is key.
definitely. And I know that's a huge part of the HTMA mineral balancing program is the diet based on oxidation rates. It's very simplified into like a fast oxidation tends to need higher fat in the diet to kind of slow them down, whereas slow oxidation actually needs a little bit more carbohydrates. And I'm not a big stickler for the diet, but I do agree like lots of cooked vegetables and good quality meats is a staple for anyone in any society.
Well, yeah, I mean, it just goes back to it essentially goes back to nature.
Right.
Just go
Yeah.
back to vegetables, animal protein. Luckily for us, we live in a modern day society. We can get more, um, you know, we can target down with the oxidation rates because yes, a fast oxidizer will burn energy quicker. So fats and oils are going to slow that process down, in the production of ATP. And then slow oxidizer, they're a little bit more challenging because the slow oxidizers, although carbohydrates burn more quickly, most of them are in such a state physically that they've just got blood sugar regulation issues. So actually telling them to eat more carbohydrates can be challenging for them. So you've really got to find that balance. But when it comes to foundation, how the program deals with foundation is it just tries to get back to root the root nature. What are we doing? We're giving minerals that you should be having. You know what I mean? You're taking in all of the stuff that's natural. And again, similar to the oxidation, we can get a little bit more complex because of the modern day science. Going back to the slow oxidizer issue, If you've got blood sugar regulation issues, eating a lot of fruit, even though that's natural, can be difficult because
Or
it's
if you've
just
got copper toxicity, candida. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah. You do have to add additional things onto there. So
right.
essentially, we're bringing in stuff that is natural, and we're removing stuff that's not unnatural. That shouldn't be there. We have a detox system for a reason, because it releases stuff that we shouldn't have there. However, again, because people are in such a state, it's very them detox systems are just not functioning properly. So we need additional procedures to essentially help the body kickstart itself. And obviously practitioners have different detoxification protocols that they like to recommend. But for me personally, the coffee enemas were essential for me. Um, and the sauna therapy was very, very helpful. I personally find I would have struggled to remove a lot of this stuff, especially quickly, without additional detoxification protocols. So you could argue, well, it's not completely natural because a coffee enema is not natural. Um,
Right.
sauna's not natural, and the argument would be, but your body is also in an unnatural state at the moment. So we have to do things additionally to help get you back into that equilibrium. And when you're there, you can stop the enemas and the saunas if you want to. I mean, I'm in a position now whereby if I didn't want to do saunas or enemas and I just ate a good quality diet, I'm pretty sure I'll be fine for the rest of my life. Do you know what I mean? Because I put so much effort the past 12 years into essentially rebuilding the whole system. Um,
Right.
so that's how the program deals with foundation. It's putting in and taking out, and give and again, and you're doing natural lifestyle things. Get to bed at a reasonable time. Pretty natural.
Go outside.
Uh, yeah, go outside, get in the sun. Just chill out a bit. You go and watch these animal programs, or you go to like on a safari trip. The lions and they're not running around all day, shopping and techie shopping. They're doing this, doing that. They're chilling for most of the time. Do you know what I mean? So I think that's our natural state is rest and rejuvenation. But and I think I've got nothing against free market capitalism. I think it's amazing, but um, it does generate this, and you'll know it now. I mean, you've come a long way in your healing. I've come a long way in my healing. Freaking work all the time. Do you know what I mean?
You
Luckily,
know,
learn
it's
from it.
yeah, go ahead. Sorry. I was gonna say it's funny because we're actually gonna move to Thailand.
Oh yeah,
We're
that's
I'm done. I'm done working this much. My copper personality is over. This chapter is done.
yeah. Well, I mean, everyone's got their own vibe about things, but um, I mean, I went to Thailand, did a lot of healing, become an expert at rest and rejuvenation. I mean, all my family buy me for my birthday and Christmas is spa vouchers, because I've just got this vibe that I just chill, which I do chill a lot. Um, but for me, I think, once, now my body's healthy, I've got energy consistently. I do like um, to be of service is probably the best way to describe it.
Hmm.
But you got to
Yeah.
be of service you got to be of service in a healthy, balanced way. Turning up, I try and switch off at a certain time. I don't work weekends.
Right, because otherwise you're still operating from that wound of I'm not good enough and I have to overachieve, which is what could have potentially led a lot of us into that burnout to begin with. I know definitely was part of my story.
Yeah, but
So,
I think now it's not even about overachieving. I think when you raise your vibration, when you become healthier, And, I think one thing that me and you have got from all this is a newfound passion to help people. And when you're passionate about something, it's difficult to put down. It's like a good book, like me building my software. I find it difficult to put down. It's not because I want to overachieve or anything like that necessarily. It's because I would much rather prefer figuring out how to overcome this particular coding challenge than to, sit on a beach for a week, even though that's nice now and again. So it's all about balance. It's
Right.
literally all about balance, about a balanced diet, balanced lifestyle, balanced work, balanced relationship time. The whole freaking world, the whole universe is built on balance at the end of the day. So I think you got to master balance in order to have a decent life, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's come back to we're looking at copper on the test. So we mentioned low, very low copper is that bio unavailability, most likely being stored in tissues like the brain, like the liver. And then really high copper on the test would mean that you're eliminating it. Or if it's on the first test and you have really high copper, what does that usually mean?
Well, if you get a really high copper on a hair test, because copper builds up in various areas of the body, the liver, kidneys, essentially just means it's ended up building up in the hair. You could take a biopsy of someone could have copper toxicity. You take a biopsy of the brain, which I wouldn't recommend.
Yeah.
Oh, there's no copper. There's not much copper here. Take one of the liver, not much copper. Take one of the kidneys. Oh, it's full of copper. It just turns out that it's accumulated in the hair on an initial hair test. So that's really easy to see when someone's suffering from copper imbalances because it's just glaring at you. But for the times where you'll find that when someone's dumping copper, when copper's actively come out of the tissues and it's into the bloodstream, they get quite severe symptoms. Whereas you'll get someone come to you and they've got an elevated hair tissue copper, they're not going through copper dumping symptoms, although they've got copper toxicity symptoms. If that makes sense, it's two different. It's two different vibes. So that's essentially what high hair tissue copper means on an initial test.
Mm.
So and then you've got hidden copper toxicity, so biounavailable copper, and this is where Dr. Eck and Dr. Wolfson and other pioneers come into their own, because those are the ones that have basically done the test, and then on the third test or the second test or the fourth test, the copper's jumped up, and they've said, "Oh wow, this wasn't high on the first test." And they've realized that there's trends over time that actually, if someone's in a 4-low pattern, the chances of them getting a copper dump is quite high. So this must be an indicator. If someone's got a calcium shell, the chance of them having a copper dump on a subsequent hair test is quite high. That must be an indicator. So they come up with all these indicators, and then on a hair test, what you can do is you can uh, basically run through all of them indicators and sort of check them off. So you can essentially quantify how potentially severe someone's copper toxicity is by how many copper toxicity indicators that they've got. Um, so and then you've got to I'm sort of going over the same stuff really. But then you've got sort of when to obviously supplement copper, but we're just talking
Hmm.
about copper
Yeah.
toxicity and
Because
reading
I'm,
the test.
yeah,
That's the key things.
one of my questions is, so I've never gone through a copper elimination per the hair test, and I've been doing it correctly for at least 2.5, maybe 3 years at this point. Um, I was doing it incorrectly for a bit too, but I am obviously better. I've like almost fully recovered from all the mast cell activation symptoms I had. I no longer even have like allergies that I had my entire life. And I never seen copper being eliminated. It's been very, very low the whole time. So I'm kind of like wondering, am I eliminating copper through another pathway that's just not going to be seen in the hair.
Yeah.
Um,
One of the, you could say, downfalls of hair mineral analysis is that we're taking stuff from the top of the head. You know, when things are being eliminated, it usually goes downwards. But
yeah.
one of the reasons why lead is very challenging to see dumping on a hair test is because it's a really heavy metal. So it tends to go down the body. It's a little bit like mining for gold. You know, the way that they sift gold out is because the gold drops to the bottom of the sieve because it's a heavy mineral. So in order to get big dumps on a test, you need to have massive eliminations essentially. So much so it's just coming out the hair as well. Do you know what I mean? So there's going to be plenty of times whereby you get little bits of copper coming out, and you might just see a little increase in copper on the hair test. But you know, you might have had it with clients where the copper might go up 1 to 2 milligrams percent, and they'll get copper dumping symptoms. Do you know what I mean? So
Mm-hmm.
it's not a case of like all of a sudden you're just going to get a crap load of copper coming into the system and that's it. You are obviously going to get trickles of it coming out. You can actually see it in P. So you can actually get heavy metal P tests that also test for that also have copper built in there. And that is one thing that I get all my clients to have on hand is a heavy metal P test, because one of the good things about them is that um, you can see problems in the moment. You know, you're not waiting a week to get a hair test.
Well,
You
it's
know,
like 3 weeks here.
yeah. So you can have a pee. It comes up mercury, it comes up copper. So there is times whereby I felt like I'm dumping copper. I'll do a pee test. It's showing copper, but my hair
Mhm.
test has not gone up too much. Um,
Okay, that makes sense. What
we
what what brand of the strips, or is there like is there worrying about like accuracy with those at all?
so um the brand that I use is called Osumex, Osumex. So I started using them maybe 4 or 5 years ago, just out of curiosity. And I've obviously got a lot of experience in heavy metal dumping. So I kind of know what I'm dumping. I know when I'm dumping mercury. I know when I'm dumping copper. I know when I'm dumping aluminum because you just get to understand the symptoms. So I'll go for a detox. I'm dumping mercury. I'll do a P test. It's come up mercury. Um, I'll do it again. I'll get like some heart palpitations, this sort of dark feeling. I'm dumping arsenic. I do a
Mm,
P test, comes up with arsenic. Um, I did the same with copper. So the way that I've tested for reliability is just by doing it
yeah.
and with clients. But just quickly going back to the copper thing, unfortunately, when you do see a big jump in copper on a hair test, the symptoms associated with that are extreme. Not nice. So maybe thank yourself lucky that you've not actually seen it, to be honest.
I haven't
Uh,
had any problems with mineral balancing. Like it's been pretty smooth sailing for me. I mean, I was extremely sick, so I don't know the first like little bit
yeah.
of it, what could have been what, but this
Because
last,
sometimes people will like not do the program to the letter. So they might have a bit more carbohydrates than normal. They
oh
might do,
yeah, I didn't do it perfectly at all. Yeah.
yeah. So if you do that, the chances of having big dumps diminish
Mhm.
because the body's using energy to deal with carbohydrate intolerance and all that sort of stuff. I was doing the program to the letter in Thailand, where it's a
Yeah.
hot climate. So literally all of my energy was going into healing. So my body just went, "Ugh."
Yeah.
Heat, you know what I mean? So I don't, when I got back from the UK and I got myself back into work and all that sort of stuff, I never really had such an extreme dump. I generally find the people that have the big dumps are the ones that are like they're at home with their parents. all they do is watch my YouTube channel all day, every day, at times. And they'll just do like 4 enemas a day, half an hour in the sauna every day. They'll stick religiously to the diet. Those are the ones whereby, I'm getting a phone call, I'm on my way to A&E sort of thing, and I'm like, you're dumping copper, and I'll get the hair test back, and it's like, insane. So I would think myself, I think that's the reason why you're not seeing that big jump, but it's, you will have been releasing it, uh,
Hmm.
my opinion.
Yeah, because
Uh,
I work with a lot of really sensitive people, and so I don't want to scare them because, they hear about like your story or people's stories about these scary metal eliminations, and then they don't want to do it at all. So
well,
yeah, I want to let people know it doesn't always like it's not always like that, and go as slowly as you need to. Take breaks.
yeah, I mean, I think when I talk about it, I'm going back to what I went through, and I didn't have the advice, the proper advice. So, I know now when someone's going through copper, I can instantly say to them, go and eat loads of scrambled eggs. They can go to the shop and eat loads of scrambled eggs. It's full of choline. All right. That's going to help reduce the symptoms. And then I can say, right, go and buy some inositol. Go and buy a bottle of choline. Have it at hand. I tell them to have it. I have it, ready. You know, Modified citrus pectin helps. Zero charge. Um, coffee enemas. So I didn't get that, when I went through it. So I don't want to scare people off in that sense, because if you are working with a practitioner that understands all of this stuff, you can rectify the symptoms fairly quickly. I ended up doing the opposite of what I should have done.
Oh
You
no.
know, makes me a better teacher, but yeah, it was not a nice experience. You know.
Mm.
So don't get freaked out by all that sort of stuff because I mean, I think a big addition to what we do with the Dr. Wilson camp is we never really recommended binders,
Right.
because some of them can actually remove some of the healthy minerals and stuff. And
Well, I
we've
don't
sort of
know if they had the same like type of binders, the research behind some of the stuff we use now back then. I mean, I could be wrong, but that's kind of my
I
theory. That's to why it
think like
wasn't included.
wasn't even around or heard of. I think that's quite a new thing.
Which
Uh,
one?
Modified citrus pectin.
Yeah. And I think about like, I mean, chlorella was obviously around and deactivated charcoal, but yeah, like some of the newer ones, I just
Mm.
don't know if they were well studied, or
Studied.
used.
We used to like listen to Dr. Wilson religiously, almost brainwashed. But at the end of the day, his program fixed me, But it doesn't mean the program can't be improved upon. And I think one
Yeah.
of the I've always thought as a practitioner is the detox reactions are just not very pleasant, even if it's mild.
Yeah.
So, separating myself from that camp and speaking to people like you, a client of mine, Kyle Pesh, you might have spoke to him. He was a
Hmm.
client of mine, and now he's a practitioner. He was the one that put me onto modified citrus pectin. We did the research into it. Looks good. We know the practitioners using binders. We was aware of some of the ones like spirulina, chlorella that can be a bit modified. This sounds good. Let's try it. Amazing. Like we're getting results. Do you know what I mean? And it's good. And I think even if there was some negatives of removing some healthy minerals, I think the benefits outweigh the negatives if you're doing it for a short period and going for a healing reaction. Like
Yeah.
if you take the binder for 2 weeks and it really reduces the feelings, you're not going to come out at the end of the 2 weeks and all of a sudden you got a 25% reduction in zinc in your body. Do you know what I mean? So I think the benefits outweigh the negatives, and we've obviously manufactured Valence Nutraceuticals, so we sort of realised that the supplements on the market could do with an upgrade, especially
Oh
around
yeah.
ingredients, bioavailable ingredients. So that's something that we created last year, and that's been really successful.
Oh
Um,
yeah, I'm a huge fan. I have my parents on them. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's been amazing the and the feedback as well. I mean, the feedback speaks for itself. I mean, they are more potent, but at the end of the day, if you're making a superior product, a premium quality product with better absorbable ingredients and minerals, you're gonna get faster results essentially. So we're actually creating a binder too. So hopefully that's going to run alongside
That was my
uh,
next question. Yeah.
run alongside. That's going to be powerful. But it's just amazing that just we're improving on the program. I mean, I came across it doesn't work for some people, but the X39 LifeWave photo for me was astounding. I had unreal results off that. My clients do. So we're starting to work with integrating a few peptides just to help with the process with stem cell therapy, that sort of stuff. So, we used to call it nutritional balancing, and then now it's called mineral balancing. But it's evolving, and I think we're getting a strong conglomerate of practitioners that all kind of agree that yes, the supplements did need improvements, and it is good to have some high quality binders in there and a few peptides here and there for the right reasons are beneficial. I know
Right.
you know much more about me than peptides, but I've really enjoyed playing around with them recently. So
Yeah. At the end of the day, people
it's
just
awesome.
want to feel better. And I think mineral balancing as that hub and the foundation for, you know, what nutrients are we using, but then also, I heard someone talking about they had a client who had like hives every day for a year doing mineral balancing. And I was like, wow, they could have really used some KPV peptide. Like that would have been made their year a lot more easier. So I do think that there's lots of
Well,
things we can do to
you
support
look at
people.
you look at GHK, GHKCU. I mean,
Yeah.
the way that we deal with copper imbalances is to essentially improve the soil and allow for the body to release the copper. The problem with that is it's released in an unbound form. So it causes havoc. There's a reason why you get copper toxicity symptoms. But with GHK, with the photo modulation therapy, I think that's what it's called,
Yeah.
where we're stimulating the body to increase its GHK production inside the cells, and then that's binding onto copper. It's doing two things at once. Well, it's doing multiple things at once, but in terms of copper, it's binding to toxic copper, but it's also making copper available. So, I'll say this to clients, and they'll have like a mild copper dump, but it's not because it's bound. It's not intense. But then their
Yeah.
skin will improve overnight because they've got bound available copper. And then one of the other key reasons why copper is so amazing in a bioavailable form is its ability to stimulate the body to create stem cells. And if you've got additional stem cells in the body, instead of like 5 years of doing coffee enemas and regenerating the liver, you can speed up the process. Because one of the things that GHK does, especially, is it regenerates liver tissue. So for me, it's like wow. I mean, you have people on the program for 1 year, 2 years. They'll dump copper. It's not a great experience, even when you get them, on all of the stuff for some people. And it's like, well, now you can have this patch. I'm not saying it works for everyone. It doesn't work for everyone.
Yeah. It did
No,
nothing for me.
no, it doesn't work for everyone. But for the people it does work for, it's like a miracle. It's a freaking miracle. And you give people life again, especially with people who've got sort of borderline anemia or anemia that they're not even aware of. Making that copper available, allowing iron metabolism to sort of improve. your whole energy improves, your whole mood improves because you're no longer anemic. Because you
Yeah,
get a
that's
proper,
incredible.
you know what I mean? So
I
I
just
did,
got GHK, yeah, without the copper. So I'm
yeah,
excited to try that one. Yeah, so for
it's,
those listening, there's the one with the copper and the one without.
yeah. I mean, I
So
don't really recommend anyone on the program to take it with
with,
copper,
yeah, exactly.
just because unless you're a fast oxidizer, it's probably not too. I mean, I've tried it. I've tried them both. Um, but I did get the same feeling as what I did with the patches, um, but not as powerful.
Mm,
Because the patches is using light, which is going in, working at a cellular level, whereas a peptide's not necessarily working at a cellular level. You're injecting it, and it's just going into the tissue sort of thing. But I did get the same feeling. So so yeah, it's pretty exciting to give people these opportunities. And you got things like Selenk and Semax peptides, which can help people with nervous system dysregulation and sleep issues and stuff like that. It's 7 years ago, if someone come to us and said I got sleep issues, we'd just say take an extra paramin. And we've evolved somewhat from that, where it's like, well, actually, you can maybe try a little bit of GABA or L-theanine. And I mean, I'm actually it's not really peptides, but I'm sort of getting into I don't know what you'd call them, they're just liquid injectables like NAD. Um, I've
but
got
yeah,
a
like, yeah, I
yeah,
have
yeah, I've
like
got
the patches, the NAD patches that you can wear.
yeah. So
Also, didn't really notice a difference, but some people absolutely do.
well, I think maybe it could be the calcium. Because calcium hardened, I mean, I don't know what pattern you're in now, but you could hypothesize that anyone that's suffering from low cellular permeability
Hmm.
may struggle with the patches. When I had the patches, I was a fast oxidizer, and they have increased cellular permeability. So
Hmm.
you could argue anyone that's struggling with cell permeability might struggle with the patches, but you know
That would make sense. Yeah.
that's not definitive. But yeah, I mean, I've got a little blend, a little night blend, and it's got like L-theanine, magnesium, GABA, I think glycine, and sometimes I'll struggle a little because I'm a fast oxidizer. I might work too late. Sometimes I'll struggle a bit with sleep, or just want something just to calm me down a little bit. And I mean, they calm me down quicker than anything. I mean, 10 mil of that, you know, amazing. But anyway, this is just sort of research. I'm not going to tell. I don't want anyone to go out and copy what I'm doing.
Right.
But
Not medical advice.
no, not medical advice. But we just evolve it. So one of the things we've definitely integrated the binders. That's going to be in the app soon. We've I do recommend the patches for some people, even though they don't work for everyone. It's worth a try. And the peptides are a bit more challenging because all of a sudden it's like, oh, needles, you know. But you can only really give advice for peptides.
Yeah. There are some that do work well orally. And going back to kind of the mast cell copper toxicity type camp, the one that I see works so well with most people is that KPV because
KPV.
it's great for candida, gut issues, mast cell stabilization. Yeah, it's life changing for some people.
Yeah, I've not tried it. Um I got really heavy into the peptides a few months ago. Um but sort of like, sort of start you start getting a bit ejected all the time, in the stomach
Yeah.
area. It can be a bit painful sometimes, cause a few lumps and stuff. So I sort of like, went off them. But I'm in a different situation now where I don't particularly need anything. It's just out of curiosity.
That's the goal. Yeah. Hmm.
So it's like
Well,
TLC.
now you're probably moving into like Brian Johnson anti-aging stuff where it's like, how do I maintain this long term?
Yeah, it's just maintenance now. But I think again, if going back to the foundation, I've spent 10 years basically rebuilding my foundation. Going through the aluminum, going through the copper, the manganese, the arsenic. I had, sh- I had so much arsenic from cheap red wine. I used to drink cheap red wine out of the bottle when I was a kid, and I was full of arsenic. I think now, because I think you can get too obsessed,
Yeah,
with
absolutely.
things can become pathological. I think Brian Johnson's one of them individuals.
Oh, definitely. It was just an
But
exaggerated example.
I think Dr. Wilson is, in all honesty, is a brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's gone too far, pathological. I do think for me personally, it's about coming back into balance. Um, because it's very easy doing the program to isolate yourself. Whenever you get obsessed with something, you end up isolating yourself, like Brian Johnson or Larry Wilson or whatever. But at the end of the day, life's about living. You know what I mean? It's having
Yep.
relationships and raising children and I think if you can you know eat well, have a relaxed lifestyle, have really high quality relationships, do something that you feel like you're contributing to society. Um, you're going to be pretty well. You're going to live pretty long. Do you know what I mean?
Oh,
And
yeah.
it's a bit different for people like when they start the program because they're usually really ill. So they've kind of got to just take a step back from society a little bit. It's usually because they've been too much. They've gone too
Right.
much to the other side. It's like yin and yang. I mean, the one thing that we say in mineral balancing is that people have yin disease. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Essentially means that they're too yin. So in order to get them back into the middle, we actually have to go extreme. So it's like extreme rest, loads of sauna therapy, loads of coffee enemas, but I got to a position where I sort of started going over here and I was just like, I'm like, man, I need to get myself over here. I got quite very
Yeah.
isolated and
I think that's part of the chronic illness journey
yeah, yeah, yeah.
is removing yourself from whatever you were and figuring out who am I really?
Mm,
Whatever that was didn't work. That was
yeah.
facade, fake, me trying to be something I wasn't, and then coming back to yourself.
I
Yeah.
think Maslow's hierarchy of needs is quite accurate.
Mm.
I think a lot of people when they start the program, they're just trying to get that first line of the pyramid,
Yeah.
health, safety, security. I mean, a lot of these
Hmm.
they've not just got health problems; they're in toxic relationships. Do you know what I mean? They're
Oh,
in bad.
absolutely. Yeah.
And then what I found is when I sort of like got that level right, this natural feeling inside of me was like, I need friends. I need to try.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the other level is above friends, but then you got the top one, which is self-actualization, which is basically what you've just said. It's fully understanding who you are as an individual and just embracing that into the world. You know what I mean? And that's
Absolutely. Yeah.
key to everything.
And I think this is a good stopping point. I do have to hop off, but thank you so much for sitting down with me and talking about one of my favorite topics.
Problem.
Tell everyone where to find you.
Cool. So if you're interested if you're a practitioner especially, and you are interested in the software that I've built, you can find that at www.hairanalysis.report. I do have a lot of the Instagram for that is at Hair Analysis app. I do have a lot of YouTube videos as well over the years. That's Life Labs HTMA. And if you do want to get in touch with me, my personal email address is lewis@deephealingspace.com. There's quite a few different things going off there.
Yeah.
I do have clients, but I only have a few. Most of my time is took up on the software side of things, helping practitioners
Hmm.
um, with the reports and building out that system. But if you're
Yeah.
really working with me, then send me an email. We'll see what we can do.
Perfect. All right, Lewis, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you everyone for listening.
Appreciate it. See you later.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I am just so thrilled that you're listening to the Healer Revolution podcast. This has been a huge passion project for me and super therapeutic on top of that, helping me to use my voice and connect with other like-minded individuals. So if you're enjoying the podcast, please like and subscribe. Please share on social media or with your audience or friends or loved ones. I truly appreciate it. It does take a lot of time and financial costs to run the podcast, and it is not a moneymaker, let me tell you. So if you are enjoying this, I would truly appreciate your support just by sending me a post, a like, and a subscribe. Thank you so much.